The mirror was already waiting for me long before I was brave enough to stand in front of it. I remember the way my hand hesitated above the bedroom door handle, as if opening it would somehow divide my life into two versions of myself. The person everyone expected me to be, and the person I wasn't entirely sure I was allowed to become. Had started as a joke. At least that's the version of the story I told myself. My girlfriend, Emma, sat cross-legged on the bed holding a makeup brush like a conductor's baton, smiling with the kind of confidence I had always envied. "You spend enough time helping me pick outfits," she laughed. "It's only fair I return the favor." The room smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla candles. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, turning the world beyond the glass into blurry watercolor shapes. Inside, the mirror watched silently. It would become impossible to ignore after that day. "Only if you're comfortable," she said. Comfortable. The word floated between us like a test neither of us knew how to grade. Part of me wanted to laugh and refuse immediately. Another part, quieter but far more honest, was curious. Not curious in the dramatic way movies describe curiosity. More like standing outside a locked room in your own house and wondering why you've never opened the door before. "Okay," I heard myself say. The answer surprised both of us. Emma blinked. "Really?" I nodded before courage had the chance to escape. The first thing she reached for wasn't makeup. It was hair. "Hair changes everything," she explained. She brushed my hair carefully, patiently, separating strands with practiced fingers while I stared at my reflection trying to understand why such a simple gesture felt so enormous. Nobody talks about how strange it feels to see yourself becoming unfamiliar while somehow becoming more recognizable at the same time. She adjusted my fringe slightly. "There." I looked up. The difference was tiny. Objectively, almost invisible. Yet somehow the face staring back looked softer around the edges, as if someone had lowered the volume on years of expectations. The mirror noticed before I did. That became my private thought after that day. The mirror notices first. Always. Emma smiled. "You look nervous." "I look ridiculous." "Those aren't the same thing." I laughed despite myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe fear and embarrassment only wear similar jackets. The makeup came next, but slowly. No dramatic transformations. No impossible movie montage. Just small steps. A little concealer. A little effort around the eyes. Small adjustments that felt strangely larger than they appeared. Every few minutes I looked toward the mirror. Every few minutes it returned a slightly different version of me. Not someone else. Just another possibility. The strange part wasn't seeing change. The strange part was realizing how many expressions I had spent years hiding from my own face. The uncertainty, the curiosity, the vulnerability. They had always been there. Now they had somewhere to sit. Emma stepped back. "Open your eyes." I did. For a moment neither of us spoke. Not because the result was shocking. Because it wasn't. The person in the mirror still looked unmistakably like me. But they also looked like someone who had stopped apologizing for existing for at least a few seconds. The silence stretched. Then I laughed nervously. My friends would never let me live this down. The words escaped automatically. Old defenses working overtime. Emma didn't laugh. Instead she asked quietly, "Would you let yourself live it down?" That question landed harder than any criticism could have. Because I didn't know the answer. The rain outside grew louder. I looked back toward the mirror. Said nothing. Mirrors never do. They simply return whatever we place in front of them. The problem was that for the first time in years, I wasn't sure what I had been placing there. Later that evening I caught my reflection unexpectedly in the dark television screen across the room. For a split second I didn't recognize myself. Then came the surprising part. I didn't immediately want to look away. That frightened me more than anything else. Not because something was wrong. Because something might actually be right. The next morning I woke up expecting embarrassment to erase everything overnight. Instead I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror before work, remembering every tiny detail. The angle of the brush. The quiet concentration. The version of myself that had existed for only an hour. The mirror noticed first. Always. And for the first time, I wondered whether it had been waiting for me all along. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Emma appeared on the screen. Lesson 2 tonight. I stared at those 3 words for a very long time. Because saying yes no longer felt like trying on someone else's identity. Felt dangerously close to exploring my own. I spent the entire day pretending not to think about those 2 words. Lesson 2 tonight. Meetings came and went. Emails piled up and disappeared. Conversations happened around me like radio stations fading in and out of range. Somewhere behind all of it, the mirror was waiting. By the time I reached home, the sun had already begun slipping behind the buildings outside my apartment window, painting the room in shades of gold and amber that made everything feel softer than usual. Emma was already there. No jokes this time. No teasing. Just the same calm smile that somehow made difficult things feel possible. You can stop any time, she reminded me. The strange thing was that hearing those words made me want to stay. Hair first. Always hair first. That had become the ritual. She showed me how small adjustments changed the shape of a face in ways I had never noticed before. A different parting. A softer frame around the cheeks. Tiny details that somehow carried enormous emotional weight. The mirror noticed first. Always. Tonight it showed me something new. Confidence wasn't arriving all at once. It was arriving in inches. Emma handed me the brush. Your turn. I immediately shook my head. No chance. Why? Because I'll ruin it. She smiled. That's usually how learning introduces itself. So I tried. The first attempt was uneven. The second wasn't much better. By the third attempt I was laughing too hard to care. For years I had believed confidence arrived before action. Maybe it was the other way around. Maybe confidence was simply what happened after surviving enough awkward moments. The thought stayed with me. Over the following weeks, our evenings developed their own quiet rhythm. Brushes on the desk. Music playing softly in the background. The mirror waiting patiently. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes silence says exactly what conversation cannot. Then came the unexpected problem. Not the makeup. Not the hair. People. One evening my friend Daniel called unexpectedly while I was still sitting in front of the mirror. I nearly knocked half the brushes onto the floor trying to hide everything. My heart raced for reasons I couldn't fully explain. When the call ended, the room felt smaller somehow. Emma noticed immediately. You're scared someone will find out. I laughed nervously. Wouldn't you be? She considered the question carefully. Maybe. That wasn't the answer I expected. Then she added quietly. But sometimes we're more afraid of being seen than we are of being judged. The sentence followed me for days. 'Cause she was right. My fear wasn't attached to anyone specific. It was bigger than that. What if people laughed? What if they didn't understand? What if I couldn't explain something I barely understood myself? Most frightening of all. What if I stopped wanting to explain altogether? The mirror offered no advice. Never did. It simply reflected the questions back at me. One Saturday afternoon I caught my reflection while passing a shop window downtown. For a split second I adjusted my hair instinctively the same way I had practiced at home. The movement happened automatically. Natural. Familiar. Froze. Not because anyone had noticed. Nobody had. The city continued moving around me without concern. People carried coffee cups. Cars passed. Conversations drifted through the air. The world hadn't stopped turning. Only I had. Because somewhere along the way this had stopped feeling like pretending. It had become learning. Learning presentation. Learning expression. Learning that identity is sometimes less like discovering a hidden treasure and more like assembling pieces of a puzzle you didn't know belonged together. That evening I stood in front of the mirror alone for the first time. No guidance. No encouragement. No audience. Just me. Picked up the brush. Adjusted my hair. Took a slow breath. The reflection looking back seemed nervous. Excited. Unsure. Hopeful. Oddly enough so was I. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Emma. How did it go? I looked toward the mirror one more time before answering. For the first time, the person staring back didn't feel like a stranger visiting my reflection. They felt like a conversation I had been postponing for years. My fingers hovered above the keyboard before finally typing the truth. I think I'm starting to understand why this matters to me. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Her reply arrived moments later. Good. Nothing more. Nothing less. Outside, the city lights flickered to life one by one against the evening sky. Inside, I looked at the mirror. The mirror looked back. The distance between us felt smaller than it had ever been. The mirror was the last thing I looked at before turning off the lights each night. Not out of vanity, not even out of curiosity anymore. It had become something else. Checkpoint. Proof that conversations with ourselves do not always happen with words. Weeks passed quietly. The rituals remained. Hair first. Always hair first. Then patience. Then practice. Then the strange feeling of recognizing pieces of yourself hiding inside unfamiliar experiences. The world outside my apartment never changed. Morning traffic still complained beneath my window. Coffee still tasted better on rainy days. My coworkers still argued over things that would be forgotten by next week. Yet somehow I felt different moving through all of it. Lighter in some places. Heavier in others. Growth rarely travels alone. Usually arrives carrying questions. One evening Emma asked a question I hadn't prepared for. If nobody else existed, she said, would you still do this? The answer arrived immediately. Yes. The speed of my response surprised me. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just truth. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. I thought so. The room felt very quiet after that. Because suddenly this wasn't about approval, or rebellion, or proving anything to anyone. It wasn't even about transformation. It was about permission. Permission to explore. Permission to learn. Permission to exist without immediately demanding a final answer from myself. The mirror noticed first. Always. Months earlier it had reflected confusion. Later it reflected curiosity. Now it reflected something new. Is not complete peace. Not the kind stories end with. Real peace. The unfinished kind. The kind that still asks questions while no longer being afraid of the answers. The biggest surprise came from the people I trusted most. Eventually I stopped treating the subject like a secret hidden behind locked doors and whispered conversations. I shared small pieces of the journey carefully. Slowly. Not everyone understood immediately. Some asked awkward questions. Some simply nodded. Some admitted they had their own interests, hobbies, or parts of themselves they had hidden for fear of being misunderstood. That changed everything. Because suddenly this wasn't a story about hair or makeup. It was a story about masks. Everyone wears them. Some are professional. Some are social. Some are inherited from expectations we never agreed to carry. The difficult part isn't wearing them. The difficult part is remembering where they end and where we begin. One rainy evening, almost exactly a year after that first nervous conversation, I stood once more in front of the same mirror. The same room. The same soft light from the window. The same quiet hum of the city outside. But not the same person. Not because I had become someone new. Because I had stopped running from someone familiar. My hand rested lightly against the edge of the mirror. I remembered the fear. The embarrassment. The panic when the phone rang unexpectedly. The certainty that acceptance belonged to other people but not to me. Felt impossibly distant now. Not gone. Just smaller. Like thunder after the storm has already moved beyond the horizon. Emma appeared in the doorway behind me. Thinking again, she asked. Always. She laughed. That's your problem. No, I said, smiling at my reflection. I think it used to be. For a moment we both looked toward the mirror. The old companion. The silent witness. The object that had appeared in every chapter of this story without ever speaking a single word. The mirror noticed first. Always. But eventually I caught up. I finally understood what it had been trying to show me all along. Mirrors don't create identity. They reveal honesty, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, sometimes one brushstroke, one conversation, one quiet evening at a time. I smiled at the reflection staring back at me. Not because I had solved myself. People are not puzzles meant to be solved. They're stories meant to be lived. The reflection smiled back. This time neither of us looked away. And somewhere beyond the glass, beyond expectation, beyond fear, beyond the versions of myself I had spent years performing for the world, I found something quieter and far more valuable than certainty. Found permission. The mirror noticed first. Always. This time finally I noticed too.